I just got my CALF Visinse camera yesterday, so I've had it for about 24 hours, been playing with it and experimenting, doing a lot of test shots, and I have some initial thoughts and feedback. There's been a lot said about this camera. I would say more of it being negative than positive from what I've seen in reviews and videos posted, but I kind of had a different experience, and some of it was similar in my experience to what I'd already read online. So I kind of wanted to go through some of the pros and cons and whether or not I regret purchasing it. And spoiler, I don't. So I'll start with the pros of this camera. One being the company selling it. So I know that CALF partnered with another company. So this isn't solely their baby, but they have been really responsive when I've reached out. I've reached out twice over email before receiving the camera for updates and info. And both times within 24 hours, I got a response. So I'm really happy with the response time. It seems like they really care and they're really trying to be on top of that. And the experience that I've seen others post about is that when they've emailed with questions about updates or features being added or problems that they've encountered, that they've also gotten very fast responses from CALF. So I think that's a huge plus, is that the customer service is really on point. Another thing that I thought was really reasonable is that this camera was shipping from China, and from the day that I ordered it to the day that I had it in hand, it was 11 days, which is, in my opinion, really reasonable coming from China. That's express freight by air. I wasn't aware when I ordered it that it wasn't warehoused in the US, but I mean, it didn't make a big difference for me. I only have one, so I can't show you the camera because I'm filming with it, but the build quality seems really good. I liked how it was packaged. The camera itself feels solid. It feels like it's made out of high quality materials, feels well made. I have no complaints about that. It feels like I got a quality product and not something cheap. Now, obviously, anyone who's familiar with VR 180 footage, who's watched stuff on YouTube or GeoVR, this camera's footage is not going to look as good as, let's say, a Canon R5 with a dual fisheye lens setup. You're talking about a $5,000 setup compared to a $700 to $900 setup. So it's really not fair to compare the two. In the test footage that I've shot outside, inside, with different lighting conditions so far, I've been very happy with how the image quality looks. My main complaint right now would be the frame rate. I've heard people talk about how it appears to be a variable frame rate no matter what you set it to, and that you can notice stuttering, especially when there's a lot of movement either in your scene or if you're moving the camera a lot. And that I can see. But for still shots like this one, and I'm currently filming in 6K at 50 frames per second, so it looks a lot better. My point is that for 1/5 the cost of a Canon setup, you're getting a fairly decent budget pick. And that's what I was going for, is a budget way to film VR 180. I've been into VR for like 3 years now, since I got my first headset and started playing around with this stuff. And I've been waiting for an affordable consumer camera to come on the market for like 3 years. This camera, in my opinion, is that camera. Now, it does have some flaws, and I'm going to get to those in a minute. I think for what it is, it's pretty good. The last thing that I think this camera does really well so far from my playing with it is that you don't need to do any post-processing to the video to upload it to YouTube or other platforms that support VR 180. I mean, it will just directly take that file immediately without having to touch it at all. No injecting metadata, no stitching. That is super convenient, and I really like that feature. And I think for who this camera is marketed to, I think that was really important, and they nailed that part of it. Okay, so for some of my complaints about this camera, the native onboard mic is trash. It is awful. You can barely hear anything as is. And then when the camera's been filming for a little while and starts to heat up, the fans kick on and you can hear those fans, and anything that you might have been able to pick up with its super low volume before then becomes impossible to hear. You can see this for yourself. Go look up test footage from this camera on YouTube, and you'll notice that you can hear that fan going on anyone's camera that's not using an external mic. So I am using external mic, as you can see here. And it has a 3.5 millimeter jack. So initially I tried plugging it into there, and it didn't work. And after looking a little bit online, it appears that it's not yet functional. They've said that they're going to introduce that functionality. I guess right now it's used only for a headset, which I don't really understand that. For now, I've plugged it in using a USB-C connection on the side of the camera, and that's working fine. So I plan to use an external mic anyway, so it's not a big deal to me that the onboard mic didn't work, but it is something to be aware of, and a little bit frustrating that you do have to have an external mic if you plan to have any audio with your video. One of the other things that is not great about this camera is in my outdoor testing yesterday, I'll show some of the footage. It was around 3:30 in the afternoon, so in the last hour of sunlight before sunset, golden hour for photographers. The direct sunlight on buildings in the shot was completely overexposed and blown out. Again, that wasn't a surprise to me. I'd seen that in other users' videos. The adjustments to exposure, or being able to adjust them ourselves, is going to be important. I think they're working on that from what I understand, but out of the box, that's not there yet. So I would primarily use this in indirect sunlight outside or in a well-lit indoors. When you have good lighting like I have in here, so I have a light behind the camera, I also have 2 windows. So there's plenty of light in here. The image looks fairly good. I really can't complain. One of the other things that I don't love is that to shoot in 8K, you're limited to 30 frames per second. And then at 6K, you can go up to 50 frames per second. And at 4K, you can go to 60 frames per second. In a perfect world, I would love to shoot 8K 60 frames per second. But again, this is a budget camera. You can't get all the best features when you're paying 1/5 the cost of a professional setup. So I'm happy to accept those limitations. For now, the sweet spot for me appears to be 6K at 50 frames per second. That image quality looks good enough for me, and I don't get as much jerkiness or frame issues with the higher frame rate. The native onboard memory is 24 gigs, and I don't think that's a problem, but it's fairly small. If you don't put an SD card in, you're going to be really limited in how long you can shoot, because these video files are like a gig a minute, and it's a UHS 1 slot. So you're kind of going to be limited in your write speeds on that card to about 130 megabytes per second. I think faster write speeds would improve some of the frame rate issues that we see in the finished videos. And I've seen other users on YouTube talking about that. Unfortunately, faster cards tend to be UHS 2, and as far as I know, the port on here does not support that. So you're kind of stuck with a max of around 130 megabytes per second. And it doesn't look awful. I'm just making you aware because that's something I spent some time researching myself. Another thing that is a little bit petty to complain about, but it is true, I've heard other users say this, is that one of the 3 buttons on the back of this camera looks like a record button. It's a red circle. We've been conditioned to associate that with, record. It's not the record button, it is the power button. And I think that they realized that was a problem, because now instead of just turning off, it'll actually pop up a menu saying, do you really want to turn it off? And you have to hit OK. So I've done that a few times on accident, even though I was already aware of it. It's a little annoying, but the pop-up message helps you prevent you from turning off the camera when you didn't mean to. It gives you that extra warning, which is nice. And I think that was added recently in one of the firmware updates, because I don't think it always did that. My last complaint, and this is a fairly big one, is that on their website, they advertise that this can connect directly with devices, including the Quest 3. So you can see I have my Quest here. I went into the Bluetooth, I connected it, and it looked like it connected. It showed a pairing code, and it looked all good to go. But beyond that, I don't know if I'm missing something, but I could not get, I couldn't watch playback in my headset as is advertised. I searched around on Reddit and YouTube, and I couldn't find anything from any users, explaining how to make that happen. So I don't know if that's a feature that's coming, because the Bluetooth is there. It just doesn't seem to connect in a meaningful way that allows you to actually interact with the camera. If someone's aware of how to do that, please comment below. If not, I'm going to reach out to CALF and ask them if that's coming in a future update or what the deal with that is. So yeah, that's kind of my thoughts, my pros and cons list with 1 day of use so far. I think for the price point, it is a great camera, despite its flaws. And I think that with my experience so far with the level of responsiveness and updates that CALF has already pushed out, that I expect them to continue that. And I think the camera will get better over time. It definitely is not a super polished, although I will say mine it feels pretty polished. I think if some of the issues that people complained about originally were still there, then I would probably agree with them. But they've pushed out a number of updates over the past few months that have really improved the user experience and overall product to a point where I feel comfortable saying, if you're looking for a camera in this price point, this is probably one of the better ones available, unless you want to go secondhand with the older 4K and 5.7K cameras like the Insta360. I didn't want to do that, and I'm happy with this purchase. So those are my thoughts. Thanks for watching. See you next time.